Greetings, LEGO fans! I've been on this wild YouTube journey for 4 months now, and to celebrate hitting 5,000 subscribers this past week, it seemed a perfect time to give you all a look behind the scenes at how I make my videos. So, I'll take you through my process from start to finish, and give you some hopefully helpful and encouraging insights along the way. So, get your director cap on, and let's make a video together. To achieve the goal of making my videos feel like mini documentaries, I knew I needed to script out most of my content. I don't use any fancy scripting software, opting instead for a simple Google Doc. Once I've gotten my thoughts out and given it a few rounds of polish, it's time to record it. For recording audio, I use a Zoom H4n handy recorder. It's actually a pretty old device, first released in 2009, but it's got great quality and I've seen no reason to replace it. In addition to the recorder itself, I use a cheap windscreen and a pop filter to reduce the wind sounds or plosives you often get with consonants like P and T. Since I don't have any recording studio to speak of, I usually just record my voiceovers on my bed, since the blankets absorb a lot of the surrounding sounds. The voiceovers might sound polished in the final version, but believe me, it's a rocky process to get there. So keep your wits about you as you her inclusion along with taking the number 4 splot. After I'm relatively sure I've said everything correctly, I use Adobe Audition to edit my audio. It's a pretty straightforward process of cutting out all the takes I messed up and making it all sound like it was delivered impeccably on the first try. Once the edit is tightened up to my satisfaction, I apply a little bit of compression to keep the volume consistent and export. At around the same time this is all happening, I've usually at least begun gathering footage for my video. My primary camera is the Canon 5D Mark IV. Much like my audio recorder, this camera is also a bit of an oldie, having been released in 2016. In my career as a videographer, I've used a wide variety of cameras, but this is the best I've come across for filming small objects, which makes it perfect for LEGO. My go-to lens on this camera is this Canon L-Series 16 to 35mm zoom lens, because it allows me to get really close to small subjects and still remain in focus. Shooting in 4K is a must for me because it gives me so much flexibility in the edit to add zooms, pans, and tilts in post and still have super crisp resolution. When I'm not using this camera, I just use my phone, which at the moment is the iPhone 15 Pro Max. For most shots, I use a free app called Blackmagic Cam that gives me a lot more control over exposure, frame rate, and focus than the native camera app. If I'm filming a time-lapse, however, I just use the native time-lapse feature. I typically use the Canon 5D for any locked-down tripod shots and my phone for any moving shots, because the internal stabilization on the iPhone is actually pretty darn good. For lighting, I use these 2 Dracast LED panels that I picked up used a while back. They each have 2 knobs for brightness and color temperature, which, as you can see, have seen better days and are more than a little finicky. I've taped a little diffusion paper on each of them to keep the light nice and even on the subject. Since LEGO is a super reflective material, this is an absolute must. In many of my videos, you've probably noticed my use of this turntable. I picked this up on Amazon for about $80, and it might be the best investment I've made in gear for this channel so far. It comes with a remote to change the speed and direction of the rotation, and is just right for the style I'm going for in my videos. It is pretty loud though, so if you're trying to shoot anything with sound, it doesn't work particularly well. If I'm opting for a solid color background, I simply use these large pieces of construction paper I picked up at Walmart for 88 cents. That's right, we're keeping it fancy here, people. If I want the backdrop to be more bright and vibrant, I often employ a little extra lighting in the form of these 2 basic LED desk lamps, also from Walmart. Any scenes with this kind of solid color backdrop are shot right on my desk, while anything with my city or other skyline as a backdrop requires a bit more jerry-rigging. My current solution is to stack my daughter's play bins and a puzzle board on top of my foosball table to reach the appropriate height. It's pretty ridiculous and tacky, but it gets the job done. To throw a little color onto the background of these types of scenes, I use this color-changing LED light to cast the right mood. This alone has a huge effect on the final shot. It may look super goofy off camera, but some of my favorite shots from all of my content have been achieved using this setup. For the stop motion sections of my videos, I use my same 5D Mark IV in photo mode to take individual pictures that I string together to create the illusion of movement. There are tons of great tutorials for LEGO stop motion on YouTube, but my biggest tips are to be sure to secure the set with either some gaffer tape or sticky tack, and to keep your lighting consistent to avoid a flickering effect in your final animation. I also use this remote shutter to avoid touching the camera and bumping it mid-shot. Once I've taken all my pictures, I import them into Adobe After Effects as a JPEG sequence, being sure to play them back at 15 frames per second. I chose this as my standard frame rate because it's a happy medium between smooth motion and the amount of pictures required to complete a shot. Because the JPEG files are taken at such high resolution, it gives me all sorts of flexibility to zoom in, pan, tilt, track, or anything else I want to do with the shot. There are plenty of stop-motion animation programs out there, but they're often really expensive and don't give me quite the amount of flexibility I have with this method. The animated mouth effect is achieved using a minifigure mouth pack I purchased on Etsy. There are a number of these available out there, but the one I got is from the YouTuber Maladaptive Films. It's basically a bunch of PNGs with different minifigure mouths representing all the vowels and consonants. In Adobe Premiere, I just go frame by frame and match these images up with my voiceover. It's not the most enjoyable process in the world, so I tend to keep my stop-motion talking to a minimum. So, keep your wits about you as we dive into the heart of the jungle. Once I've got a phrase completed, I send that over to After Effects to overlay on my animation. I size it down appropriately, adding a bit of blur and color correction to make it match the scene, and then keyframe it so it matches my character's movements. To hide the original mouth, I create a small solid that matches the minifig head color and place that between the footage and the superimposed mouth. After all of that, voila, you've got yourself a moving and talking minifigure. Once I've got my voiceover, animations, and footage ready, it's time to tackle the editing. This is by far the most time-consuming part of the process, but it often is the most fun. It's also the point where you get to enjoy the emotional roller coaster of thinking you've created the worst video ever, all the way to being proud of the final product. Throughout the whole process, I make sure to keep in mind what I want the video's thumbnail to look like. A lot of people advise making the thumbnail before the video, but I usually end up needing assets from the video, so it usually comes last. I'll admit, thumbnail creation is not something I really enjoy doing or think I'm particularly good at, but I recognize the importance of getting the click, so I take my time on them. The style I've settled on for now is featuring minifigures prominently in each thumbnail, because I've found that that's often the most recognizable element of any LEGO theme. Since I'm not a whiz at Photoshop or Canva, I actually use After Effects for my thumbnails, since it's a program I know well and can work quickly in. Once I've decided which minifigs I want to feature front and center, I'll take high-resolution images of them, mask them out, and place them. I also make sure that my minifig avatar is always somewhere in the thumbnail, since I want people to associate that face with this channel, and hopefully recognize it immediately. For the background of the image, I usually just photograph an empty corner of the box art or instructions of one of the sets in the theme I'm covering, and just blur it a bit. It's embarrassingly simple, but surprisingly effective. Once I've obsessed over and double-guessed the composition of my thumbnail repeatedly, I'm ready to upload my video and show it to the world. Making YouTube videos is a lot of work, but I hope I've demonstrated that you don't have to have some fancy studio or crazy expensive gear to do it. If I'm any indication, you can build an audience by just recording voiceovers on your bed and filming LEGO sets on top of a foosball table. But if you have a passion for something, whatever that something is, there's someone out there who will connect with your work. I've had so much fun creating these videos and interacting with all of you in the comments over the past few months, and look forward to what this channel may bring in the future. Thank you so much to the over 5,000 of you who have found value in my videos, and here's to many more.